situation is. Like, have they had an ergonomic assessment before? Have they ever even given it any thought? Like, what are people working with? So you should be able to see the poll here. If you're not, just let us know in the chat, and we'll try to troubleshoot that. But just to get a little bit of knowledge to see where people are at. Awesome. Most of us have responded here. That's great. So yeah, it seems like most people have given it some thought. I will publish these so you guys can see. And yeah, so most people have given it some thought, right? Which is a good place to start. And we hope to, you know, use this time to help add to that so that you can put some of these thoughts into action. And I'm hoping that even on both ends, right, if you've never really thought about it or you've had a full assessment before, that you'll still be able to, you know, definitely take something out of this and apply it right away to your situation at home. All right, I'm just gonna go ahead and stop sharing there. All right. So let's kind of dive into it. 6 steps that we like to kind of focus on for optimizing your workspace. So there's some stuff that regard to the chair, your posture, your environment, and then kind of your body position and moving within your environment. So we'll jump into the first one here. Adjusting the chair height. And so just kind of quickly again, how many people in the chat maybe just respond with kind of yes or no? When you sit down and you set up and kind of sit down for the day, how many people have heard that you're supposed to, you know, make sure your feet are flat on the floor? Just throw a yes or something like that in the chat. You know, yes, no, not sure. Okay, so yeah, a lot of people have kind of set up like that. Awesome. Cool, and I mean, flat on the floor, but hard to because of short legs. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, that's sometimes good advice, but it goes back to that thing that, you know, not everything is built for everybody, right? One size doesn't fit all. So what we really want to be doing when we're coming in and sitting down for the day is making sure we're adjusting the chair height, not based on how our feet are hitting the ground, but based on where our forearms are, right? So we want our forearms to be relatively parallel to the ground, and with your arms 90 kind of bent at your side at 90 degrees. And from there, using a stool or something to bring that floor up to your feet so that your feet aren't just hovering in the air. So that might look a little bit something like this. I've got my kind of makeshift desk here. So when I'm coming in, I want to make sure that I'm almost relatively parallel here to my workstation. And I'm not too high where I'm up here and I'm kind of reaching down this way, or I'm not way too low where I'm going to have to kind of be like this with a little bit more bend in through there, and then again resulting wrist position changes. But at home, I know a lot of us don't have a nice fancy chair like the one pictured here, right? We don't have all those bells and whistles to be able to adjust everything to, you know, perfectly to us. So you're going to probably run into a couple problems, and which are some of the ones that we've listed here, right? So your chair is too low, and you can't get your forearms parallel on your kitchen table. Your chair might be too high, and you know, you can't get those forearms parallel as well. Or, you know, maybe your knees don't fit under the table, your arms are in the right spot, but you can't quite get it into there. Maybe you're sitting on the couch, right? We can't quite get those things quite right. So at home, some of the kind of quick ways that we definitely want to adjust this is using pillows or cushions, right? So I've got a couple here, just as an example. So this one's probably a little bit soft, right? So just your standard pillow, right? If you nice kitchen chair there, right? Maybe I need a little bit more height, so I'm gonna go in this way to help give myself a little bit of height, right? The better option would be something like this. So it's more of a firmer foam, higher density, kind of like that memory foam. And again, it's gonna be better at cushioning and providing that support for you. This one here is called a kabuki cushion. It's got a little cutout in the middle. It's really used mostly for coccyx pain and things like that, but the foam itself actually works quite well. Either for your chair to bring you up a little bit. All right. In the other scenario where you are the table is too low, right? You can't get your chair any lower because it's a kitchen table chair. It doesn't have any adjustment, and you need to bring that table up. What you can do is use books, textbooks, blocks of wood, anything that's firm to slip under those table legs and bring that table up to appropriate height so that you can achieve that 90-degree kind of parallel forearm on the side there. All right. And then again, it's going to be playing with this a little bit, right? We're aiming for roughly approximately parallel to the ground, but depending on the chair, the table, and what's going on, how much depth is underneath that table, you might not be able to get your knees underneath. We'll have to play with that a little bit there. But using some of those tips and tricks, either propping your chair up using the pillows. Again, I know some people are saying that their hips and glutes and stuff are getting sore from sitting for too long on not very comfortable chairs. So using that little bit of a firmer kind of pillow can help a little bit with that, but it also can help adjust your workstation height there. Anything to add on that there, Erica? We're going to get into a little bit of the chair backs and kind of how to adjust that in a minute here.
Yeah, the standard dining room chair is lower than an office height chair. So you're never starting at sort of an equal playing field. So most people, unless you're really tall, will need to put something in their chair. It's not just for what we call short people. Most average height people will need to add something to the chair.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, exactly. And if you can get your hands on your office chair, that's a great other option too, right? That is a possibility for you to bring that home. That's something that you can do, and then you have all that full adjustability and functionality of that. All right. And so the last kind of point here is kind of bringing us into the next slide as well. Sometimes we're not going to be able to get close enough to that workspace, right? If the dining room chair has some interesting shaped arms on it, armrests that are going to run into your table so that you're not actually able to bring yourself close enough to be in a nice position, then we're going to have to kind of play with some things to fix that. So typically the next step we want to do is adjust our chair back, right? So if we have an adjustable chair, we want to make sure that it is fixed when we're typing, and that means just locking it in position so that when you're sitting on it, you're not bouncing off the back, right? You're able to lock it into position there. You want to make sure that it's kind of upright in a comfortable position and that you actually relax and use that chair back. That's the number one thing we see a lot of times. You can see it in the picture here. People are just kind of scooting forward at the edge of their chair, whether that's because their workstation is too far forward, they need to kind of get closer to it, or just because they don't fit in the seat pan of the chair. They end up not using the backrest, and again, you're not really letting the back support really do anything for you if you're not using it. So at home, how are you going to fix that? Again, using pillows, using something ideally a little bit more high density, firmer foams, but we can use something like this. We have some back, like kind of lumbar supports here, right? You can use that in a couple ways to kind of fit in there as a lumbar support, but also just to fill in those gaps. A lot of times, dining room kind of kitchen chairs have a natural kind of angle on them that pushes you back. So you're probably going to have a little bit of space that you won't be able to quite fill, and if you want to use something like this to fill in that space, that's a good option for you. At home, if you don't have something like that, you can use a rolled up towel, rolled up blanket. I've used a rolled up sweatshirt with the arms kind of hanging out that I could tie behind the chair, and that way I could kind of move that support up and down as needed. Anything like that to help fill in that space, and so that chair is actually supporting you. So here's kind of an example of someone doing that at home, right? We can see they've added a pillow to the bottom of their chair to bring their height up a little bit. And then they've filled in that gap there with another pillow, just so that the chair back can now support them and they don't have that open hole there that might let them fall into a bit more, posterior tilt of their pelvis or anything like that. And then we'll get into a little bit more later on how that will affect the spine and the rest of your posture going upwards. All right. And then lastly, again, this we kind of see a lot, and I think is a little bit more prevalent now being at home. I know myself included. You're at home, maybe you're working in your pajamas. You're trying to feel a little bit more comfortable, and you end up, getting into a nice slouch position where you're comfy. You're in the couch, kind of leaning back like that. You can see here how when they're leaning back, the angle of their neck. If I take the angle of my neck like this and then bring myself upright, it's kind of like working my day facing down like this. And you can see that might not be the nice position on your neck, right? Well, you're not letting the chair really support you and, give you that extra lumbar support that it's, designed to do, right? So we'll touch on the couches a little bit later as well. They're not our favorite. The ideal would be to get it, yourself a nice chair of some kind, or, make something at home using all those pillows and blankets and things like that to help pad it out so that it fits you appropriately and that you actually can sit upright in it. Anything to add in there, Erica, before we move on?
No, just that often when we're sitting at home and we're working, similarly to the picture on the right, is we're in relaxation mode, and whether it's because we're surfing the net or we're gaming, so that's the position that we often go to first of all. But you need to be in ready position. Similarly on the left, it's sort of like if you're getting into a cockpit and readying yourself for the day, and particularly where your desk might not stay your desk all day long. If you're doubling from your dining room table, and in 1 minute you're eating off of it, and the next minute the children are all there, and now you sit down to work. So it's a multi-purpose area. So when you do sit down to work, you need to recheck that it's all set up for you the way your needs need it, and not just you're running in at the last second.
Yeah, exactly. Good. All right, let's move on to the next kind of area. So we've talked a bit about the chairs there. Moving on here is something that everybody likes to talk about, and kind of we hear it all the time in the clinic. Clients saying, "Oh, I have poor posture. I feel like I'm slouched." Things like that. I've always been told growing up that I hunch over. So that's a really common thing that we always hear here, and we're going to touch on a little bit. But the next kind of quote there is one that, maybe isn't quite as common, and it's one that I quite like myself. Your next posture is your best posture. And really what that's kind of getting at is that we want to have an optimum posture, but we also want to move, right? We want to make sure we're moving more throughout the day. And I think that quote there kind of captures those two aspects to ensure that we're not just freeze in one position all day, whether that's super, super hunched or standing up super, super straight. That the movement aspect is important there. So the thing is, from home, a lot of us working on laptops, and laptops typically lend themselves to some poor postures, just based on how they're set up. They're kind of a combination of the best of as many worlds as they could, and so they make compromises, right? And what that means is that our screen is attached to our keyboards, and so we can't necessarily always have the screen in a position that we would like to keep our head in a position that we would like. So you can see here on the left, that's kind of really typical. The screen's down, you're looking down. You can see how that would be, not feeling so good on their neck. The other thing I find with laptops, though, is because of their portability, it allows you to work in different areas, right? So you might be working from your bed or from your couch, areas where you're sitting and your posture may not be the greatest. You can see in the bottom right there, he's looking over to the left, but his legs and everything are going out over to the right. You can imagine working an 8-hour day kind of twisted to your side like that. Your body's probably not going to like that very much, right? Same goes up top there, working from your bed, you're twisted to the side, paper's going one way, head's going the other way, body's kind of rotating one way and compensating. And if we were all on desktops, that's not something that we really have to deal with. So how do we kind of set this up so that we can have an optimized position for our workstation throughout the day? So it's going to look something a little bit like this. So we'll break it down into a few different areas: screen position, environment, and your chair. So with the screen position, ideally in the office or at home, you want that screen so that when you're looking straight ahead, what you're working on is right kind of straight ahead of you, right? And so that might be a little bit up and down. I know some of the suggestions out there are kind of like line the top of the screen up with your eyes. things like that. And I like to say, just you make sure that you're looking at whatever it is that you work on the most, is it kind of in the center of your visual field there. And that includes, like, if you have two monitors, right, you want to make sure they're aligned so that you can see both in your peripheral vision and you're not having to crank your head to the side throughout the day. But using a laptop at home, that means that we're going to have to raise it up, right? So we're not going to be able to probably do this if we're just have the laptop on the table. So some options, you know, there's kind of fancier options there. We have some things over here. You can see I got my laptop here. You can use something like this, right? So a laptop riser, which is, again, just easy, goes there. Now it brings that screen up to a position where I can see it, all right? They're pretty affordable. You can get them on Amazon or from some of the local Staples and that kind of thing. And these ones are nice. They can adjust as well. Just a little click in the side and you can move it around. But if you don't have something like that, you can always go with this thing. Probably people have a little bit at home right now, just a case of beer, right? Putting that underneath there. Just to give you, I mean, obviously, probably a bigger case of beer would be better in my case here, but just to give that raise again, textbooks, anything like that, that's going to help bring that laptop up to a level where you can see it straight on. All right. The second thing that goes along with this is your environment, right? So if I bring my laptop up, what is that going to do with my hands and the rest of my body? Well, it means that we're going to have to try to get ourselves a full-size keyboard of some kind that we can plug in, and a mouse ideally. These two guys are going to be kind of lifesavers for you. They're going to allow you to bring that laptop up to use as a monitor and then use the mouse and keyboard in a way that we would at the office, or in a way that's going to be optimal for your posture. So you can see now I'm here, I'm able to be typing this way. The laptop is higher up, kind of more in my visual field, and I have my separate mouse here. And we're going to go into how the laptop kind of affects your wrist and arm position in a little bit here, but it's definitely something to consider and to make sure you have, because your environment does play a big role on what your posture is going to look like, right?
Sorry, Adam, to interrupt here really quick.
No problem.
I think it cuts out a little bit when you turn over and turn around to show demonstration.
Okay.
But I think it should be okay if the laptop moves with you. But it seems like it's going quite silent on my end.
Okay. So what we were just saying there, just kind of refresh a little bit. We were talking about quickly about using the something to raise up your laptop, right? Whether that's, you know, the case of beer, a fancy, you know, adjustable monitor stand, a couple textbooks, anything like that. And then what that's going to in turn involve is you using a, you know, full-size keyboard or a mouse of some kind in order to use that.
And we have a question from Emily, just to know if an Apple mouse and keyboard could work as well.
Like brand-wise?
Yeah, I guess the style and the brand, like with on that end.
Yeah, I mean, like getting that a keyboard or an Apple mouse, Apple keyboard, it's going to be a full-size keyboard, right? So it's going to, you know, be able to bring the keys a little bit wider apart and allow for a better position of your arms and wrists overall. The mouse itself, yeah, I know there are a lot of kind of like ergonomic mouses out there and things like that, but I think using any kind of mouse is going to be a bit better than using the trackpad on your laptop for sure. And you really just want to get something that's comfortable for your hand, that sits in your hand nicely, right? Everyone's going to be a little bit different, right? Depending on the size of your hand. So if it's, you know, bigger or smaller, you're just going to have to try it out and see what's comfortable and what you like, right? Because if you don't like it, you're probably not going to use it, and you're probably just going to use the trackpad on the mouse.
Okay.
Anything to add there, Erica, on that note in terms of keyboards recommendations?
Yeah, I just usually suggest getting a separate keyboard and mouse is kind of essential, and it's a very inexpensive addition. And I notice here Diane says a little further down, if you don't have, yeah, you're absolutely correct. You can't raise your laptop if you're not using a dedicated keyboard and mouse. And really, if you're working at home for any appreciable length of time, you need to have a designated keyboard and mouse. You're going to compromise your body if you're trying to do it all off your laptop. all the time.
Fair enough. Yeah, I'd agree. It's definitely one of those, big bang for your buck pieces that, are going to make a world of difference if you're working from it at home for long periods of time. The other thing I wanted to touch on in terms of environment, depending on what you do for work, you might be on the phone quite a bit, right? And so that lends ourselves to kind of pinching that phone in between our ear, right? And holding it up against our shoulder. Again, you can imagine if I'm like this for an extended period of time, that's not going to feel great on my neck, correct? So at home, using either AirPods, some kind of headphones, putting it on speakerphone, whatever it is, so that you don't have to, crank your neck to hold that. I know sometimes in offices, they have kind of bigger ergonomic kind of sets that help to keep that neck a little bit more neutral, but I'm assuming a lot of people from home are using their cell phones, which are quite thin, and you're really going to have to kind of bend and lift that shoulder on one side in order to hold the phone there. So yeah, get a headset, get a set of headphones, something like that you can connect into there, or just use it on the speakerphone function so that you're able to kind of stay upright as you're talking, especially if you talk for long periods throughout the day. And then lastly, chairs. So we talked a bit about the chair already and how to adjust it a little bit so that it fits you a bit better. But chair, what you're sitting on is going to contribute to the rest of your posture. So I'm going to try to turn here and let me know, guys, if I kind of cut out again. But if I'm sitting in a really soft chair where my hips are kind of dumped back this way, you can see then the rest of my body has to kind of compensate. And I've got a lot of extension into my neck, kind of losing my natural curve of my spine in order to keep my head upright, okay? Same thing kind of goes in that couch, right? So the couch really, one, it's lower than a lot of chairs, right? So naturally, it's going to put your knees a little bit higher than your hips, which is going to kind of dump you back into that position that I was just showing. And also it's soft, right? So you're going to kind of sink into the couch a little bit, right? And really lose that natural curve that we want to try to maintain when we're sitting for long periods of time. And kind of cause all those compensations with the rest of your body kind of rounding and bending in order to keep your head upright and looking at what you're doing. All right. So here's kind of what we were alluding to a little bit earlier, but we're just going to touch on a few things here in terms of wrist and hand position and arm position and how all that influences the rest of your posture and, wrist pain, shoulder pain, things like that, right? So you can see in the first picture on the left there, we've drawn in that line. You can see the amount of deviation that's going through the wrist, kind of cranked all the way out to the side. You can imagine if you're working like that for an extended period of time, that's not going to feel very good on your wrist, right? And so like we were talking about getting, a keyboard earlier, it's going to allow you those hands to be a bit further apart, right? Because the keyboard isn't as smashed or as small and kind of squeezed together, which will help to decrease a little bit of that angle. The second one there in the middle, you can see they're just kind of, and really common, you end up resting your wrist on the table or on whatever surface you're using, right? From there, what we're doing is really we're cutting out a lot of degrees of freedom of movement. So instead of being able to move from our shoulder, our elbow, and everything like that as we type away, now we've pinned that wrist. Sorry, here. Pinned my wrist down, and I'm trying to just move like this all day, right? That's not going to be good on the wrist in terms of just overusing that kind of smaller joint, right? We'd rather get more of that motion coming up and through the shoulders. And the last one here, not the best picture, but that smaller keyboard tends to lend ourselves to bringing our hands in, elbows flaring out like this, right? And so as you'll see kind of in our next picture here, the things we want to aim for are wrist in line with the forearm, right? And so what that means is that we have a nice neutral wrist going through. What I like to do sometimes is, everyone's at home, so it won't matter if you look a little silly, but draw a line, right, with a pen from your middle finger, dot it all the way down, and then dot it right through the middle of your forearm. And then when you're typing, see if those lines line up, right? Are you in a nice neutral wrist position? Are you really deviated to one side? Sometimes it can be hard to see, but if you take those two lines, they should be in a nice straight, in alignment, sorry. The second thing we want to really do is unweight the wrists. So you can see here, we're not resting those wrists down, we're lifting them up It allows us to use our shoulders as they were built and intended to move around more and get that motion from other areas and not just wear on that wrist. And lastly, arms by side. So we talked about this a little bit. Arms kind of flared out as we're in here, kind of typing on our laptop. I want you to just kind of try this with me. If you take your hands and basically turn your thumbs in towards you, you can see that's kind of that elbow out in towards everything like that, right? And now if you take your hands and turn them out the opposite way, right? So screw your arms open, just kind of feel like what that does to the rest of your posture, right? You can see as you going out this way, and I don't know if you guys want to kind of respond in the chat, does it feel better to be this way or this way in terms of your overall upper back and shoulder posture? Yeah, exactly. So like that second one, right, is just going to naturally put you into a bit more upright position, right? Getting a little more of the musculature in through your upper back, and is going to encourage a better posture, right? So if we can start by, from our hands and putting them in a position that's going to help with that, it'll feed all the way up the chain. Anything you want to add there, Erica, on kind of hand position, wrist position, things like that?
No, that's all. And I think your example of rolling the arms in and out is a really good one, because it immediately opens up your chest and makes you feel not as hunched over.
Yeah, exactly, right? So, I mean, you feel that all the way up through your upper back. So I like kind of to do that sometimes, even if I'm just, been working for a while, maybe I'll just roll my arms in and out a few times and then get myself set into that upper position and then kind of go back to working on whatever I was doing. All right. So here's just an example of what a very nice setup might look like at home. I'm quite jealous. I wish I had all these kind of bits and pieces here. I know a lot of us aren't working like that. We're working from the floor, working from the couch. But you can see here they have the screen raised, the separate mouse, separate keyboard. They even have a nice chair. But realistically, how are we going to set up our environment and what are we want it to look like? Couple things, we've talked about a few of them already, but we like to break it down into a few different zones. So zone 1 being the things that you use most frequently. So that'd be kind of like your keyboard, your mouse, things that you're going to use all the time. You want to keep within an bent elbow reach. So what that means is like within here, right? This kind of like semicircle around me, right? The second one, zone 2, things that we use a little less frequently, a bit more occasionally. We want to be within an arm's reach, right? And then zone 3, the things that we don't use so often, we probably don't have as many of these at home, but you want to be able to kind of stand up and get them, right? So kind of how this factors in at home, a lot of times I know we're working on kitchen tables, it might not be our permanent space, right? So take that extra time, set things up so you're not reaching over, whatever it is in front of you to type on your laptop. Your coffee is not in front of you as it is here. I know that's a really common one. You want to make sure you have quick access to that, especially in the morning. But putting that out kind of maybe into zone 2, your phone out into that zone 2, and then really just taking the time to set your environment up. Ideally, everything kind of on one level, right? So that you don't have to change your seat height all the time. And that way, you're set up for your day. You're kind of set up for success in that way. The other thing I want to mention here in terms of environment, and I kind of skipped over it in terms of when we're talking about chair and position and how that can affect, but if you can have wheels on your chair, that's always nice. It allows you to kind of shift around and move a little bit more. You can kind of pivot from one thing to the other, rather than if I was locked in position, right, and I'm reaching way over here, maybe I'm twisting like this to get that, because I know we're all kind of usually take the easiest way out, and if I don't have to get up out of my chair and I can just reach over like this, why not do that? But again, that's just repetitive motions like that where we're bending and twisting without actually moving and squaring ourselves up, or just kind of predisposing us to some of that tightness and pain there. All right. So anything else you want to add there before we move on to some movement stuff, Erica?
Probably just the last thing being that when you are sitting in your chair, you have to touch the back of your chair. You and your chair need to be as one. And if you have wheels, that's great, because then you and your chair can move together. We often don't have wheels at home. So you will have to take the time to slide that chair back and forth, because if you start stretching, we're built to sort of abuse our bodies 20% of the time, but once you get higher than that 20% of the time, you're a ticking time bomb. And if you need to lean back in and touch your chair and use that back for support, or if you're not touching it, why have it?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. And kind of while you're talking there, I just thought of one other thing. I know initially when people had submitted some things that they wanted to look at, people were talking a little bit about eye strain. And while that's kind of out of our scope, we can position the screen to help limit as much eye strain as we could. And so what that means is, like, if you have windows nearby or things like that, you want to try to make sure that screen is perpendicular to the window. All right, so you're not sitting with your back to the window where you're getting a lot of glare off the screen, or facing the window where it's shaded a lot and it just makes it harder to see. If you can place your screen kind of perpendicular to the window, it allows you to kind of get less glare off that screen and can help with a little bit of that eye strain there. All right, so let's move into a little bit of movement here. And as we're getting into this, I just want to see, let me get into our next poll here. So is anyone kind of currently having some aches and pains, tight areas, things like that? Let's see where people are feeling things and what we might want to spend a little bit more time on here. So I just launched the poll there. Go ahead and see what people are clicking on. You can click multiple things. All right, we'll give it a little while longer here. Let things roll in. All right, I think that's everyone. And yeah, if you are some of that other, you can go ahead and throw that in the chat there. So we'll share the results here. And by far, I mean, the higher ones are being neck and shoulders, upper back. And as we kind of go further down, less common. So definitely some of the things we're going to do today are going to help to kind of open up that upper back, open up the shoulders there, and get you moving a little bit more. Just going to take a quick look at the chat here. Hips. Yeah, okay. Yeah, definitely. Hips can get tight sitting a long time. So we'll show you a few today to work on your hips. Hope everyone's ready to move around a little bit. Arms. Okay. Thanks. All right. Exit that. And so before we move into any movement, I just wanted to recap and show kind of an overall picture of what this might look like, right? You can see he's raised his screen, he's got his keyboard, he's padded out his chair so that he's, fitted in the chair there and at some, reasonably good angles. And, that's going to be a much nicer position to kind of work on. You can see how it's, done at home. Doesn't have to look pretty, whatever makes it work, right? So let's move on to a little bit of movement. So a couple things before we get started. I always like to say everyone's kind of coming to this at a different place, right? And so the number one thing you can try to do is start to move a little bit more. Change your posture, move around a little bit, take little breaks to stretch and move around. But one of the things I like to say is use natural breaks. It makes this a little bit easier, right? If you're going to the washroom or you got to go up and get some water or anything like that. I've kind of found people fall into two camps here since we've been working from home. Some people have way more natural breaks. They're doing laundry, they're doing other things around the house as their day goes. Other people I find are moving way less, right? They don't have the commute anymore, so they're not walking as far to and from work. They're only walking, stay 10 feet to the bathroom if you're in a small apartment rather than, a couple minutes, everything like that. Just share with me in the chat there. You guys feel like you're moving more or moving less now that we're working from home? Moving less, yeah. Yeah, I definitely feel like I'm moving less, but nice. Yeah, exactly. So, some people are moving more. Some people, it seems like a lot of people here feel like they're moving less. So the one kind of natural break that wasn't as prevalent before that I feel like I'm trying to really take advantage now is webinars, Zoom calls like this, right? When you're on a meeting, if you don't have to be seen, you can always turn your video off, stand up, stretch, You're still able to listen. You can still participate if you need to, but you can be doing any kind of stretching, just walking on the spot, moving around, trying some of these exercises that we're going to do here, so that you can kind of use that break to move through things. And let's get into it a little bit here. So I'm going to kind of actually stop sharing my screen so you can see me, and then we will go through a few things. Perfect. Can you guys all see me there? Yeah. All right. So we're going to start kind of with the head, right? Moving to the neck, right? And I just want to take the chin down kind of to the chest. And you're just going to kind of do a little bit of a circle to one direction and then back to the other. And just kind of taking note, feeling what areas feel tight, feel where you feel a little bit stiff, right? So one of the ones I like for my neck is you're just going to bring your ear to your shoulder with the opposite hand holding onto the bottom of your chair. So holding onto the bottom of the chair, you're going to bring your ear to the opposite shoulder, and you might already get a nice stretch kind of coming down through the neck. Okay? If you want to intensify that a little bit, just putting that hand on top of the head, and you should feel it kind of just by adding that weight, you should feel a bit more of a stretch. And now you can use these as a pure stretch, or you can use them just as a movement, right? You don't have to, sit there and hold. You might just do a few of these throughout the day, right? Moving back and forth, right? Some way I like to bias this stretch is sometimes if I'm here, I'll turn my chin down. That'll get the neck a little bit different. Or I'll turn my chin up. And as you turn your chin up, make sure you don't lose that head position, right? Keep it kind of tucked and retracted so that you can get a nice stretch in through the side of your neck. And I hope you guys are kind of doing this with me there. I know I can't see any of you guys, but if you guys have questions or anything like that, be sure to pop them in the chat or raise your hand and we can answer them as we go through these. So just give that other side a quick try. Yeah, definitely. And I guess that's another thing I should mention, right? If you are in pain or you've been working on something with your physio and any of these exercises seem, contraindicated to what you've been working on, make sure you get that addressed, right? Don't feel like you have to move through all of them. Take it easy. Be gentle with these. If you're not feeling any direct pain or no acute pain, then definitely move your way through some of these. But always, err on the side of caution. You can always check in with somebody. A lot of physios, ourselves included, are doing telehealth, right? So it's easy to check in with people and, get anything like that addressed. So the second one here, I'm going to show you from the side. We're going to place our hands, I'm going to bring you back a little, on our desk, okay? And then from there, we're going to round our back, tuck our chin in, and then we're going to bring our chest towards the desk, arching that upper back. And we're going to flow through this a little bit. So kind of holding those end positions for about 3 to 5 seconds and just moving back and forth. And you should feel this kind of up and through your upper back. You might be getting a bit of stretching through your chest depending on how tight you are. Yeah, a couple more here. Awesome. So the next one we want to do in order to open up in through the shoulders and the chest is we are going to place our hands behind us on the desk. All right, make sure we kind of get as tall as we can. And then think about pulling our shoulder blades open. And then to intensify that stretch, I'm going to bring myself forward using my chair. Okay, I should feel that kind of all through the chest and everything in here. What we want to avoid is this position. Really kind of shoulder forward. You can't see it the best in the picture here, but shoulder forward, putting a lot of stretch on the front of the shoulder. Make sure we kind of think about turning our shoulders outward, opening up before we kind of go into that position. Right, and again, you can kind of take off some tension and move back into it. In some of these end ranges, you can do what we call a contract relax. So you can push into the table and then lift out. with the high chair back. I can see the question there. Yeah, so with the high chair back, a little bit more difficult. What I will do sometimes is if you have armrests as well, I just lock my hands onto the back of the armrest to help open up this way. You can see if I extend my elbows, I'm almost in that same position, right? So I'll use that sometimes if I have a high chair back that doesn't allow me to go behind. You can also, stand up out of your chair depending on how high your desk is, and if it's adjustable, you can stand up out of your chair and do that in standing as well, right? Or if you're flexible enough, you can even use the top of your chair back. Perfect. So we're going through those, neck, some stuff for the shoulders. And so we're gonna move into the wrists a little bit here. And so wrists, forearms, right, can definitely get overworked, especially as we're typing all day on our laptops. So what I like to do, one of them, is just placing that hand on the table, right? And then I'm leaning back towards me. And I should feel that stretch in through this side of my forearm. And I can play with the angle, right? So I can lean to one side, I can lean to the other, just depending on what's feeling tight. And then again, you're gonna wanna kind of do both sides, see how they feel comparatively, side to side, play with a bit of that angle, use it as a bit of a stretch, or just use it as a motion. Sometimes I'll do them together, right? Putting your hands like this, and I'm just rocking to one side, up and around, over to the other side, and stretching on those wrists. The other side we want to do that can get really, really tight is this side of the forearm and the wrist. So what we're going to do is put the back of our hand down against the table, and then again, lean back away from the table so you can feel that stretch through all those muscles on this side here. And again, playing with different angles, depending on what feels tight. You can try to, rotate your shoulder in and out. As you rotate it out, you'll probably feel like that puts more stretch on all those muscles there. Nice. And so playing around with those two are nice ones. Keep those wrists nice and limber. Again, you can do that kind of contract, relax in those end ranges, pushing down and pulling up in those positions. The last two I kind of want to show you here are for your hips. So I'm going to bring you over here, down this way. Grab my chair. All right. So sitting in here, nice and easy. We're going to cross one leg over the other. All right. Ideally, I want to try to get this knee in line with my hip. All right. So if I'm showing you kind of from the top angle, I don't want to have my knee too flared out this way. I want to try to get it as in line as I can. And again, depending on your flexibility, you may or may not be able to get there yet. So if we sit up nice and tall, right, you can start by just pushing the knee down. You might feel a stretch already. Other option you can do is start to bend forward from the hips, keeping our back nice and straight. And you should feel that stretch coming all the way through the back of the hip here. And again, you can play with a bit of your angle. Take your chest towards the knee, take your chest towards the foot, and it's going to kind of feel different throughout the hip there. Really quick, we'll go through the last one. I want to make sure we leave enough time for some questions, direct questions at the end. So the last one we'll do, and you can continue to stretch as we ask questions, is standing up like so. One knee on the ground. You might want to use a pillow or something for the knee. You're going to think about pulling your belly button in, tucking that hip underneath you, and then leaning forward a little bit, right? You should feel that pull come down through the front of your hip, right? Really opening up into that extension. When we're sitting for long periods of time, all this musculature in here can get really tight and kind of really compressed because we're always in that hip, what we call hip flexion. So getting out into that hip extension is awesome. And then again, you can play with that angle, right? So I can come forward. Maybe I work out this way a little bit. Maybe I'm gonna work a bit more that way. I can add a little bit of rotation, right, with my upper body and feel that stretch through here. And a little bit of rotation maybe the other way. The big thing with this one, what we want to avoid is just dumping into this stretch and really like hyperextending your lower back, right? So make sure you keep your core engaged, glutes are squeezed here as you pull forward into that stretch and kind of open up through the front of the hip. You'll notice right away, if you turn that off, you lose a lot of that stretch. So that's a good kind of check. If you're way out here, unless you're really, really flexible, you're probably not going to feel that there. All right, so keep stretching with me as we go through some of the questions here. All right, let's just take a look through the chat again.
Just going to share also our wellness day link. So if anyone wants to do some yoga or anything else during the day, you can also get
I'm just going to share my screen again. Yeah. And so, yeah, just kind of wrapping it up. We want to make sure that, like we said earlier, you're going to use this time to help work on your health and wellness, right? So that when we come out of this, that you're able to tackle whatever it is you want to do, and you're not held back, right, by, you know, some nagging pain that you got while you were sitting working at home. To finish it off, let's just kind of see. We can see on the left there, kind of not the best posture. On the right, a little bit better. Does anybody have any ideas on how we might make this even better? Share them in the chat if you have any ideas there. Yeah, that's a good call, right? So he's kind of leaning back. So that's, again, as you lean back a little bit, you're going to kind of put your head forward in order to kind of keep that position, right? So he could be a little bit more upright. His arms could be maybe a little bit more towards that parallel position. He could unweight his wrists a little, but otherwise he's, you know, doing pretty well. So, perfect. Does anybody have any questions here? Good point as well. Yeah, turn the table so it doesn't have to glare at the screen, right? Turn it, or maybe turn his position, right? So he's sideways to that. Unweighting the wrist. So what that would mean is basically, I'll go back to that position, that slide there. And so you can kind of, are you guys able to see my mouse on the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you can see here how he's kind of resting his wrist on the edge of the table, right? Ideally, when we're there, we want to be kind of floating. So with my keyboard, I want to be kind of like this and not resting down like this. Part of that, I think, is because of his position, right? His arms are a little low, and so as they come up, they just naturally kind of rest on the table. So if we could get him a little bit higher with a little bit more parallel forearm, that might be a little bit easier for him to do. All right. And so any questions that came through? No questions in there. Let me just kind of scroll back through the chat. Awesome. So yeah, there's no questions there. Just gonna kind of switch to the next screen. I'd love to hear from you guys, right? If you have anything that comes up as things go on, just shoot me an email. My email's at the bottom of the screen there, adam@citysportsphysio.com. You know, questions about your certain setup. If you wanna kind of get in, we're doing self-evaluations in-home, kind of through online telehealth to evaluate your at-home setup. We're also kind of available for telehealth for any kind of aches and pains that might be bothering you and that you might want to take a look at, and use this time appropriately so that you can kind of work on those and come back stronger when this whole quarantine thing is done. So I'll leave that up there for a minute in case anybody wants to take down that email. And you will get a copy of these slides as well as a copy of all the exercises as well in a little book, a little PDF format, so that you can kind of go through those exercises on your own.
Amazing. And then we kind of want to also know what you guys want to see next. So
right. Thank you for reminding me. I do have a poll for that. So if anyone's still around, I've got a couple options in here. I'll launch that poll. Go ahead and click through. Or if you have any ideas, just throw them in the chat there. I really want to make sure that the next kind of, future webinars are definitely as appropriate and as applicable to you guys as possible. So any ideas that you kind of come up with or think that would be valuable to you, please let us know. I'd be happy to kind of, work on some of those with you guys. Awesome, awesome. Let's just kind of roll in there.
Love it.
And I can appreciate some people probably have to run here. We're kind of going a little bit over. I hope you guys don't mind too much. We've got most people answered here, so I'll just share these results so that we can see.
Okay.
And so, yeah, it seems like, yeah, doing a full thing on just specific exercises might be a nice one.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Adam. This was really helpful. Really excited to see what's next. And I know one question we did have, the last one, was there someone's familiar with telehealth? Can you expand quickly on that for them while they're here?
Yeah, exactly. So what we're doing, it's an online kind of like, setup like this. So we set up an appointment, we'll meet over the computer, and we're really able to, assess a lot of movements, test some different, like look at how they're moving, assess, different ranges of motion, and then really, give some exercise, give some education, and get them moving on, self releases and self-mobilizations, things that they can do for themselves. I've really been a fan of it over the last little bit. I think people are, getting a lot of value from it, and that it's really putting, some of the emphasis back on the client to, take control of their health. And it's been really successful so far. I don't know if you want to add anything onto that, Erica, there in terms of telehealth, from your perspective.
Well, the same thing. It was all new to us, and we jumped in, of course, with everything that's happened in the last while. And we've been surprised at the success of it, both as therapists and for patients. And we're also doing it for one-on-one office assessments as well, and work setups at home. So if anybody has some bigger issues that weren't resolved in a group setting, it might be appropriate to do more of a one-on-one workstation setup at home and see how we can help you have a better workstation for your environment. And yes, telehealth is covered by extended health and physiotherapy.
Amazing.
And we also direct bill through the clinic, which is even nicer.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much to you both, and thank you everyone for joining. Hopefully you got some good tips and tricks. We'll share a little survey as well afterwards, and please let me know if you have any other ideas that come up, and we'll see you all next time. All right.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Bye.